In this episode of the Smart Community Podcast, I had a wonderful chat with Debbie Reynolds, also known as the Data Diva. Now, you may remember Debbie was a guest on the podcast just back in March of 2020, but actually we had recorded that episode in December of 2019. So then when COVID-19 broke out, I knew I wanted to catch up with Debbie again. And this podcast episode is an audio version of the YouTube series I've been doing, catching up with previous podcast guests during the pandemic. So in this episode, Debbie and I discuss what she's been up to since we last spoke and how COVID-19 has changed her work schedule. We cover the fact that there is an increased need for data privacy and cybersecurity expertise during this time, while so many people are on the internet more often, as well as the need for both digital literacy and data literacy. Debbie and I explore the convergence of our digital personas with our real lives and how to encourage people to take advantage of the benefits of being online while being discerning about the risks. We also discuss the internet as a human right in smart cities and what the pandemic is exposing and amplifying about the problems and opportunities that already existed in our communities, such as lack of internet access or the possibility of avoiding a commute by working from home. We finish our chat with Debbie sharing some of her tips and tricks on data and privacy and the benefits of using our technology to stay connected in this time of physical distancing. As always, we hope you enjoy listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
Welcome to the smart community, smart regions, smart towns, and smart cities. It's where we live, work, and play. With smart communities, the future starts today. Big data, smart mobility, emerging trends galore. The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.
Hi, Debbie. How are you today?
Hi, Zoe. How are you? Happy to talk with you. I'm in Chicago. Happy to reach around the world and speak with you in Australia.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you were able to make it, and thanks so much for agreeing to coming onto the podcast. As I mentioned, this will be a bit of a different one. I'm just really keen to see what you've been up to and how COVID-19 has affected you and where you are, and particularly your background in privacy and data. We recorded our episode a long time ago. Well, not a long time ago. It feels like a long time ago, doesn't it?
Yeah.
A while ago.
December, I think, yeah.
Yeah, December, yeah. So the world was a different place then, even though it only went out 3 weeks ago, I think.
Yes.
But anyway, let's start with, tell us a little bit about you. So in case people don't know, haven't listened to your episode yet, and they can go back and listen to that after this. But tell us a little bit about you and what's changed since we recorded that episode in December.
Okay. So my name is Debbie Reynolds. They call me the Data Diva. I'm the CEO of Debbie Reynolds Consulting. I advise multinational corporations on data privacy and cybersecurity issues, especially around technology and managing data. So since we last talked, I had done a lot of traveling. I have been doing a lot of traveling around the time that you and I were speaking. And I had just gotten off my last really big trip. I was in Costa Rica for about 9 or 10 days. That was vacay mostly. But yeah, so once I came back at the beginning of March, that's when a lot of the lockdowns were starting, and more of the noise about what was happening was spreading more. For me, a lot of my work, like my calendar is typically booked like 12 months in advance in terms of conferences and things like that. And because of that, a lot of people are doing virtual conferences now. So they're doing things like we're doing now, where we're meeting on video or I'm recording. Like, for example, I think there are a couple of conferences that I was supposed to attend in person that I'm recording in advance, and they're going to release them at a certain times, or certain meetings that I would have, gone to or flown to, we're doing online, so one thing that's happening a lot more that's helping me, I don't know how you feel about this, but because I'm not sort of rushing around, traveling a lot, I have a lot more time to do more heads down work. So a lot of projects that take a lot of time and concentration you can kind of do during these times if you want to. So I am working on a lot of projects like that where it's really helping me to focus and really use that time wisely that I wouldn't otherwise be, in other ways I would have been commuting or traveling or, attending events. I'm not doing that right now. I think we're all trying to adjust to the new normal. I think it's the longer that things go on, the more we realize that, that this may linger longer than we would want it to. So it's probably not as temporary as we think it will be. So I'm just trying to sort of sort myself out and figure out what is kind of the best way forward. But in terms of data, as you know, data doesn't stop, and data, it actually accelerates now because a lot more people are online now than were before. We're hearing people in mainstream press talking about data privacy and cybersecurity issues where these things were, they were basically just the foray of kind of us, like experts talking in the field or talking with specific clients that have these issues. So I think it's bringing those issues out more because we have more people online, more people sharing data, more cybercrime. All those things become more front page issues as opposed to something that you think about as an incident that can happen to someone else.
Yeah, that's so true. And something I've been thinking and doing some bits and pieces on as well is right now, we're trying to increase that digital literacy, and that's one aspect of it. But I actually think that data literacy is obviously related, but it's a separate thing because you can have digitally literate people, they can use all the things, they can, do all the stuff. But if we're not thinking about data and increasing that data literacy, then we're going to, fall into traps. And there's lots of different pieces that, will come together if we're not, or won't come together rather, if we're not increasing that data literacy as well. And I think it's a real danger, right? And particularly when we're trying to get people to take up technology so they can stay connected, both on a human level and also for work and all those other type of things. But if they get burnt from not using their data well or not understanding what their data is being used for, then we can really damage that technical layer or that digital layer that we are really relying on right now.
There's a lot to talk about, and I think being able to have these conversations in plain language is very important because anyone who's on the internet or anyone who has any type of digital life whatsoever, they need to have some literacy, like you said, in the digital world, but then they also need to know that they're potentially giving away data that they may not want to give away. You may not want to give away your worldwide rights to your image that you put on the app. So it may not make a difference today, but, maybe a month from now or a year from now, you'll care about that. So being able to really understand, things are moving so fast right now. I think it's hard because you have to kind of really sit down and think it through before you jump in with both feet and really rely on people, to get educated because it's just too easy to fall into these traps that people have because they don't, unfortunately, not a lot of people who are taking data or data brokers, they may not have your best interest at heart, even though they may be offering you something that's shiny and new that you just can't wait to have.
Absolutely. And it is a tough one because for me, I want to encourage people to get online if they're not online now, so then they can, continue to operate in the economy as well as that human connection is so important, and then giving advice to people. But then things are changing so rapidly. I mean, even, we're recording on Zoom right now, and obviously they've been in a press quite a lot lately. And I know that you've done some pieces on that as well. But then we need to weigh up and understand. I guess the biggest thing is understanding and knowing what you're putting yourself in for.
Right.
I've been doing some workshops lately, and one of them's on LinkedIn, and I go through, my privacy settings, and I just say, these are up to you, but you need to read all of them and make sure that you understand. Because for me, LinkedIn, it's public, all my posts are public, but it's there because I want to be seen in a work environment. Whereas Facebook, for example, and I don't even really use Facebook that much at all because it terrifies me a little bit, but not terrifies me, but I just don't have that same level of trust for some reason that I do with LinkedIn. But basically you can't find me on Facebook unless you're a friend of a friend or whatever. So there's these different levels, and I've made conscious decisions about what I'm going to do. And I think that's the biggest thing. I see a lot of people that are just putting all this information out there, and then it's, I heard a term, very hard to put the toothpaste back in the tube once it's all out there.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, especially, I guess, especially in a social setting or a social media setting where people, like we're having this call, because we're kind of talking with one another and we're trying to educate each other. But some people they're having like card games and stuff on Zoom, which is, perfectly fine, I think. But a lot of times people don't understand, I think I saw this in a movie somewhere, the things on the internet, they're written in pen, not pencil. I think that was from a quote from a movie, which is true. It's like, these silly, idiotic things you may be doing, if you're recording them and posting them and putting it somewhere, you definitely don't want it to be something that you'd be embarrassed about or something that will make you look bad in other settings, even though you may have intended it to be something social and fun, like for your friends. Sometimes those lines can be crossed because, it sort of all goes into the same hopper. So it doesn't separate or differentiate itself, between, this is fun and separate, personal stuff as opposed to this is like my business persona. Our digital life is, we live our lives in different ways, just in the world, just moving through the world. But our digital life is like a fragmentation of what we are and what we do. So, let's say you like Cheerios and you broadcast that you like Cheerios, maybe somewhere in your digital dossier, somewhere on the internet, that's like a very important thing to you, but in your real life, it's just part and parcel of like many other parts of you. So, unfortunately, I think digital selves and digital personas are very different from kind of how we are in our real life. And that's just based on what we want to share and how we want to share it.
Yeah, I've been talking a lot about, this smart life being real life. And I think and like you said, our digital lives is, an augmentation of ourselves. It's not the whole piece, but it's definitely part of it. And I think when we do put stuff online, we have to realize that that's real life now, particularly in these times, that, it's not just something, oh yeah, well, that's an online me. So that doesn't affect my real life. But it really does now. And I think that's one thing that we need to increase in that literacy, which is that, this is our real life, whether we're talking online or whether we're talking face to face, particularly now that we're having all of these things online. So we need to consider it even more so than we did before.
Oh, that's true, right? I hadn't thought about it that way. You're right. So basically our real life is merging with our kind of digital life because so many of the things that we would have done offline, now we're doing online. So there's more visibility to what we're doing, or, maybe like, for example, people who weren't doing online shopping before for groceries, they're doing that now. And companies are really using that information about you to find out how they can market to you or find some way to monetize that information if anyone should want it, I guess.
Yeah, because even I've been thinking, things I used to do away from my screen, I now do at my screen, like my yoga and workouts and whatever else. And so some of the things that I didn't really think were important before, like, maybe covering my camera up when I'm not using it or whatever, maybe they're more important now because I'm, I don't need people to see me in downward dog, or doing fly kicks or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, just all those things are kind of merging. And also it used to give me time away from the screen and I didn't have to, really think about it too much. And whereas now, and I've been talking a lot about digital hygiene, we need to consider that, we are spending more time on our screens, and physical hygiene is super important, but so is digital hygiene because it can really make or break your mental health, how you are able to show up in the world. And I think we really need to think about that when we are, operating in this way.
Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Turn the tables on you. So I read a statistic that as of January of last year, 2019, there was a study, I want to say PwC had done this study that said that only about 57% of people in the world are on the internet. So in a smart city idea, the city or the government or municipalities have to work for everyone. So how are you seeing people try to bridge that gap or bridge that divide? Because if people are not online, we have the luxury of staying, sheltering in place. But how can you shelter in place if you don't have shelter? Or how can you attend school online if you don't have a computer or you don't have internet access? So what are your thoughts about that?
Yeah, it's such a great question, and something I've been working on in the background as well, because I think we're not talking about that enough. It's, we're talking about things that, and I'm not saying that you and I have to do things differently and that's still important or whatever, but we really need to think about the digital divide. People that, don't have shelter, where are they going? People that don't have a device. And I think it's very well and good to say, oh, we'll just do it online. But there's also these hidden things where you might have a device, but maybe you only have a really small amount of data because you can't really afford it. Or maybe it's an old device that you can't get, the latest technology, or maybe, and that's an issue with security and that type of thing as well. But also just maybe you can't download the latest thing for your online class or whatever. And so people are slipping through the cracks, and something I've been talking about to a few of my colleagues that are working in this space as well. Got a plan that will socialize soon, but it's definitely something that needs to be considered. Smart communities cannot only be working for people that are already kind of well off, or not even well off, just have that level of connectivity. Right. Part of a smart community has to be to make that level of connectivity a human right. I think it's that reliable internet connection, because you think about it right now. If we didn't have the internet, if I didn't have a device or whatever, I wouldn't have any idea that this was even happening. I wouldn't have any idea what the rules were. Maybe I get bits and pieces, but it changes so rapidly that if we're not basically streaming it 24 hours into our heads, which is also causing issues, that we're not keeping up to date. I was just saying, I haven't got a letterbox drop, in my mailbox to say, this is happening. This is, these. Right. And, not that I need it, but it was something really needs to be considered, because, I agree. We're actually made that digital divide. It was kind of slowly, decreasing in some areas, but overall, I think increasing. But now it's exploded, right? I was talking to my friend in Vietnam, and, they've been in lockdown for 2.5 months, nearly 3 months now. I didn't even know that until I was talking to her a couple of weeks ago. She has internet. She's an online educator, so she's fine. Her brother, who's a school age, has been doing school online. But a lot of the country don't have internet. So the education is now on the television, which I thought was quite innovative.
That makes sense, actually.
Yeah. And I think it's happening here as well. I haven't checked in Australia on ABC. I mean, it's not the best solution, obviously, but it's something. And
absolutely, yeah.
And I was just talking to my friend Kim Horton, whose episode just like this went out a couple of days ago. And, he was talking, he's specialist in regional Australia, or Regional Institute of Australia. But obviously that, regional is applicable in America and other places around the world as well. But that level of internet connection, if it's not 100% even, then we can't operate in this way. So it's really, really a big issue that needs proper focus. And I don't play the health issues, obviously, but this feeds into that directly.
Absolutely.
Separate. Yeah. So it's definitely a major consideration that we need to focus on more in this. It was important before, and maybe you heard about me talk about it a lot before, but now it's exploded. And once we can get it, I guess, into mainstream media, I suppose maybe that's when it will start to really take a hold and make a difference for people that, what I talk about, the people with the most at stake if we don't get this right. And I talk about that in mobility sense, but right now it's in everything sense.
Everything sense, yeah. I also saw a stat recently in Chicago that once the lockdowns or shutdowns or shelter-in-place orders went into effect, the schools went online, and they were saying, especially the school-age children, They say up to 25% are absent, which means that those 25% somehow can't get on the internet. They don't have internet access. Maybe those kids are going to a friend's house to use their computer. They had homework, or they were going to a library that's closed. So, this is a huge issue and it has to be resolved. Another thing that I'm concerned about is having private corporations that are focused on a particular customer moving into these municipal roles where they're providing services, but their business case and their focus has only been a narrow part of the population. So let's say for video conferencing, just for example. So let's say, a company provides video conferencing just for corporate executives who are part of Fortune 500 companies. They probably really aren't thinking about accessibility of people who, let's say they don't have the best, like you said, they may not have the best internet connection, or the way that they have buttons on a screen. Let's say someone only had a phone and not a computer, that they have problems accessing, this content. So all that stuff needs to definitely get sorted out. And I think especially as companies move from the private to the public sector to try to help solve these problems, you can't just shoehorn a solution into kind of a city space without considering all people who are in the city, not just corporate executives, not just people that you typically would have only, looked at. It has to work for everyone. I heard there were people in the U.S., they have a program for low-income people or people who are unemployed. I think it's called SNAP. So it's like you get like a card where you can get food and things like that. And a lot of those cards can't be used online. So these people, if they need food, they can't shelter in place. They have to actually literally go out to a store and put themselves at more exposure, as opposed to other people who are using traditional credit cards or debit cards where they can have something ordered online or brought to their house. I mean, I just think that the pandemic is showing the cracks that were there already, but it's making it a lot more evident that, we weren't thinking about the problem as much as we should have. And I think it's a big challenge and an opportunity, especially in the smart city space, to really think it through and get this right.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And I think, some of these things that if you or I were using them or whatever, there might just be inconveniences, or even for people before, it might just be an inconvenience that we had to do this or whatever. Whereas now it's actually a real big issue, right? If I can only go into a bank, for example, to sign something or whatever, that's an unnecessary trip potentially that I didn't need to take, but I have to because the process isn't there for me to do it online. Like I have a story from a friend who, is waiting for a visa, and that whole process has just completely stopped, and they can't share information online. Well, they say they can't share information online or over the phone. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, like this is people's lives that, it shouldn't be this hard for things that shouldn't be this hard, I guess. And so I think there's lots of cracks exposed, let alone the level of, making sure we have the right level of healthcare and all those type of things as well. So yeah, it's an interesting time, I guess, to be alive and to be operating in this space as well.
Yeah, I think, there are definitely opportunities to be able to spread the word. I mean, the one byproduct of having more people be online now is that they can really hopefully absorb some of this information, or maybe they have time to really look at this. This is an unprecedented issue that's impacting all of us around the world. And I don't think we've ever had an issue in our lifetime that's been this way, where we can kind of, compare notes about how other countries are doing things or how we're, going through these issues. But, also I hope that this helps people, consumers, really feel empowered to speak up about the changes that have to be made so that people can just live in a society.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it really brings into spotlight the fact that we are in a global community, right? We all are connected to each other. We're all, affected by what we all do. And that can be positive and beautiful, but it also can have negative implications if we don't address the things that we need to address on a global scale. And it doesn't mean you have to go completely global by even doing something on a local scale. And like you said, now more people are online. We can share that. And I think even just the not more people being online, further to that, it's now normal to learn, to interact, to do all these things online. And as much as we want to see people face to face, and we definitely will in the future, the fact that we can now it's normal to learn from anyone in the world. Like, I attended a webinar in America last week, obviously online, and, I learned some stuff. And I'm used to interacting online, but I didn't really look at those webinars, or so for whatever reason, I would go to a conference in person over that. However, I got so much information that it was actually on data privacy, Bianca, who you introduced.
Oh, she was?
Yeah.
She's amazing, isn't she?
It was brilliant. I really
stunning. Love her.
Loved it. But yeah, it got me thinking about things. And obviously it was American focused, and not everything was applicable to Australia. But it just got me thinking about things. So anyway, and then for people that have never done anything online before, I was, talking to my grandma, and now she's watching her mass on the TV. And I said, oh, have you thought about doing an online craft, course or something? And she's like, I wouldn't even know where to start to get that information. So then I realized actually there's all this information there, but there's still another level of access, right, that we need to consider more, and how we're going to do that, which goes back to your question before. It's all well and good to say, well, there's all this internet, just use it. They might have access, but there's another level of literacy that is required to be able to do it, and to be able to do it in a safe way. And I don't just mean safe in physical safety or even, mental safety or whatever, but just a safe way that you feel comfortable and informed and empowered. I guess empowered is the word.
Yeah, well, and being able to find that stuff, find those, how do people, like, how would your grandma find those communities online? How do they find those resources? So all of us are all digging and looking around and tripping over things and excited to find things, that we didn't know that were there. But I've been really stunned by so many things that people thought couldn't be done online are really being done online now. So, the types of training, certification. I had a doctor's appointment online, and I thought, if I added up all the years, all the time that I took off to go to doctor's appointments, when you're literally just talking to the person, right? They're not examining you, or you're not doing some procedure. Like, why was I ever doing this not online? I mean, it just seems like complete folly that there are so many things that we could have done before online. It's kind of a waste, especially, you think about commuting times with people. I've known people for years who had jobs that I just could not figure out why they could not do them online. I mean, literally, it's like, you're doing a report, you're having a meeting, you're not doing manufacturing where you have to literally be there. So, I think this is really forcing companies to really rethink that, because obviously you can do things online, or obviously you may not need 10, maybe you only need 5 meetings instead of 10, and then just the time that people get back from not commuting and things like that, that makes a huge difference. That could, let's say if you commuted an hour to work every day, that's 2 extra hours in a day that you have that you could be doing something else. And that's huge.
Yeah, I've been thinking about putting a bit of a piece together about using your commute. Obviously it needs a sexier title than that, but really what are we going to do in our commute time? And actually, because my commute was huge when I had to go to Brisbane, and but everyone's have something, but what are we, I don't know, utilizing our unused commute or whatever. The sexier title. Yes,
exactly. Well, I don't know, I lived in Washington DC for 10 years, and it would take me, the traffic in Washington is horrid. So I only lived like 8 miles from work, and it took me like an hour on a good day to get to work, just driving. But one day I think I had my GPS on, and I found like some shortcut that got me home, or like 10 minutes early. And I was like super excited just to have those 10 extra minutes like meant everything. I said, oh my God, this is like a revelation. So I can imagine that people who aren't doing those commutes are probably going to spend more time with their family, doing cooking, doing other little hobby things. And, I find a lot of people are trying to better themselves, whether it's like education or reading or exercising or doing some new skill or task. I think people are really absorbing that time and figuring out what they want to do next.
And I think there's also, it's been talking about this collective heaviness, even if you are okay, like with the global, we have this global collective heaviness. So sometimes your commute might be just that you do nothing and just if you can. That's the other thing. We've got all these other things that are changing. We've got kids at home. We've got all these things. So I think being gentle on yourself as well is so important in this time. Like for me, when I'm studying, doing my master's, and so I feel like I have zero time to do anything other than work and study and a bit of yoga and a bit of this and a bit of that. But yeah, actually claiming back, because I did a lot of travel like you, claiming back some of that time to be kind on myself and just, relax and do think about the future. But actually during this time, just, realize that we are all suffering with this collective heaviness, no matter what level it is, and that we can, for me, I wanted to contribute and help other people that are in worse situations than myself. And so I use this time to think about those things and then, enact them as well. But then other times I'm just like, I can't think about anything right now.
I think this is an interesting time because I feel like smart cities are really, this is the future, and this is, the problems that we're having now are because we're not really thinking about the connectedness or how we can do better, especially people who are living in regions where you're together in some way, whether you're in a city, a state, a rural environment, some community, how do you operate better together? I think that is the calamity on top of the virus that we're seeing that's playing out all over the world, whether it be having ridiculous rules or regulations that make zero sense or having things that are super antiquated that just don't fit anymore. Mm-hmm. Hopefully this crisis will help people move past those old ideas that don't work. And, maybe that's the foundation for a smart city where you're what works and what doesn't work, what is best, what isn't best. So I think being able to have these concepts where they're being shared worldwide is important because everyone has different ideas. Everyone has different ways of being and living. So I think it's smart to be able to look at different locations and what they're doing with their cities, because I feel like we can all be better. And just saying, this is the way that it's always been done, it's just, to me, doesn't work today. That just doesn't work, It just does not work at all. So we need to really think differently now, and hopefully this will help get that idea in people's heads, and in terms of the people, like, people in legislature or people who are in politics or in government, helping them really turn that corner and not be so adamant about keeping things the way that they were. We know that they're not working.
Mm-hmm. It's been so great to chat with you, Debbie. I've really, really enjoyed our conversation. Let's wrap up with you giving us some of your best tips and tricks on data or privacy, since you're the Data Diva after all.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Let's see, some of my best tips and tricks. I would say for anyone in terms of just being online, before you sign up for a new service or a new process, definitely do some research. We get a lot of things, you see a banner ad and something pops up and it looks really interesting. Make sure you're not giving your data over to someone that you don't trust or don't know enough about. So, and it's hard because you'll see like some shiny new, like I saw like a dress that I thought was really cute. And I started clicking on these links and I went down this rabbit hole yesterday and I thought, oh my God, let me pull myself back. So a lot of people who want to do things like fraud and hacking and stuff like that, they're very good at getting your attention online when you're doing other things. So be careful on the things that you click on. Do research about new products or services that you want to look at. Make sure you look those things up. Thankfully, I think there's a ton of people who, whether they're professional or unprofessional, reviewers or products, there's a lot of information out there about products. So if you're not finding a lot of information about a product or they don't have a good history, you should think twice. Maybe you want to like call a friend up and ask them for their recommendations. So I get calls from lots of people where like, I'm looking for an application to do this. Do you have a recommendation? So those things may maybe help you with that. And then of course, reach out, do a search. There may be a knitting circle somewhere online. If that's the thing that you like to do, where you can join in with someone. All of us are looking for a human connection, even though we're doing it through video or phone calls. My family, recently, we did like a phone conference, so all of us did like a conference call, and it was crazy. So we thought, the technologies existed for a long time, and we just had never thought to do it. It made, it was good because instead of what we would have typically done, we would have gone to like my uncle's house or something, all gotten together. But because we couldn't, we all got on this phone, and a lot of people were out of town and different places. So it was great to like have that camaraderie and have those conversations. So, don't let the fact that you can't like go out or do different things stop you from making a connection, because you can still do that digitally, even if it's just you picking up the phone or doing a text message to a friend or a family member. I'm getting messages on LinkedIn from colleagues that I haven't seen in like 3 or 4 years. So, hey, how are you doing? And I really appreciate those messages. Maybe just reach out to people that maybe you hadn't heard from in a while. They probably really love to hear from you. And, again, we're all, some of us are twiddling our thumbs. We're probably not as busy as you are, Zoe, with your master stuff. But yeah, definitely reach out. Don't let it be an impediment to you making a connection just because you can't do so in person.
I love that. And it's something I talk about a lot. When I do get people on the podcast or people talking at conferences, a lot of the time we say you have to meet someone in person first, and then you can follow up later digitally. And I just couldn't click with me, right? Because, you and I have never met in person, but we've built trust digitally over time. We can continue that connection, and hopefully one day we will meet in person. That'll be brilliant, and that'll just add on to our already, rich connection. And so I think now, it's forcing us to do that, but I love that. Don't stop, the fact that we can't see someone in person, don't stop that from reaching out. So.
Exactly. And making a digital connection to me is no less valid than meeting in person, in my opinion. I've had, business deals from people I've never met before, or just like you and I met online and we struck up a friendship, and we are, we're colleagues, we exchange information. So it's great. So let's remove ourselves a minute and think, you can still achieve many of the same things, probably even better or faster than you could before by doing it digitally.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. And just to touch on your family conference call, I've also been doing those with my family. And it's interesting because do you have an agenda or an activity? Or do you just because if we all got it together in person, it would just be a free-for-all. So
yeah. You know what? It's kind of a loose agenda. I don't think it's anything written down, but like I have an uncle, he kind of takes the lead on a lot of things, and he'll just say, we want to hear what you're doing. He'll go around and find out what people are doing or if people need things. And it's been really interesting because like a lot of, if you're not talking to someone constantly or you're not like living with them, you don't really know what their real deep needs are. So it was interesting because I had an uncle that is in the medical profession. And he was saying that he had a shortage of like masks and the personal protective equipment. And just from him being on that call, a lot of us had stuff that we could like donate to him in his medical practice. But like he would not have known that if he hadn't been on that call. So it's pretty interesting.
Oh, that's so fascinating. And yeah, I agree. There's so many things we don't know until we ask and kind of get in a situation where we are asked or need to ask, or, it's such an interesting time and a really serious situation, but I think we need to continue to live as much as we can and then use our digital technology to serve us and how it will serve us for our needs at this time and not the other way around.
Right, exactly. Brilliant. This is amazing.
Thanks so much, Debbie. And yeah, let's follow up. Maybe we'll talk online, but let's follow up and couple of weeks or so, or a month or something like that, and see how you're doing. And
sure.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
No worries.
Bye-bye from Chicago.
Bye. Thanks.
All right. Okay, bye-bye.
Are you looking for an engaging speaker, MC, or facilitator for your next big event? Then we've got you covered. Zoe is a go-to speaker, MC, and conversation facilitator with a difference. She's a master at simplifying the complex and making connections you might never see. Book Zoe for your next event. Email hello@mysmart.community or head over to her speaker page, www.mysmart.community/speaking.
Thanks so much for listening to the Smart Community Podcast. Show notes for this episode and all other episodes are available on our website, mysmart.community/podcast. If you have any questions for us or any of our guests, you can email hello@mysmart.community. You can also find us on the socials. We are on LinkedIn and Twitter @SmartComHQ. That's com with 2 M's. If you are enjoying the podcast, please hit subscribe so you never miss an episode. And we would love for you to leave us a rating and review at wherever you listen. This really helps us reach more ears and eyes, so thank you for your support. As always, we hope you enjoyed listening to this episode as much as we enjoyed making it.
The Smart Community Podcast is what you're looking for.